Well, let me do a strange thing. Let me steelman perhaps the most outrageous point that Robin DiAngelo makes in her book, the
Good.
one that we are all being being exposed to too much. And this is that all white people are racist. We've all heard this now, and I don't know for sure that it originates with her, but her book is currently the one that is spreading most widely, and we've talked about it before on this show. So the point is absurd on its face, for sure. All white people are racist, really. But the trick here is that she has redefined what racist means. And so that's illegitimate. And I think we've mentioned before that Merriam-Webster's the dictionary is now falling in line with this redefinition of racism. And, that's a kind of doublespeak. That's, the second form of new language that Orwell writes about, not newspeak, but doublespeak, turning extant terms into something that means something so different that when people use them, no one is quite sure which meaning they intend to be using. So if we sidestep that linguistic trap, though, that she's laid for us, and say, well, certainly I know I'm not racist. What the hell is she talking about? What she means. And I really don't know that she has anything good faith about her at all. But what she and the movement means when they are talking truth is that it's true that people with white skin do continue to benefit from the privileges, especially historic, but also still contemporary, that having white skin confers. That has been true. And that's true even though class and geography are often better predictors of outcomes than is skin color. So, we can all imagine, say, a poor white girl in rural Alabama, versus a middle-class black girl in Chicago, and ask, who is more likely to succeed in this world? And it's going to be the black child in this case, even though it is also true that when those two people are making decisions about where to drive, at what time of night, and what stores to go into, and what their reaction is if they're driving and they see police, is going to be different by race. So all of those things can be true. And, it's insane, objectionable, reprehensible, all of this, to call that thing racism. That is actually deplorable, right?
Yeah.
I'd like to take that word back too. But it does obscure, bizarrely, right? It obscures this kernel of truth at the bottom. And now you have people pushing back so hard against this insane nonsense that they are also pushing back against the thing that is true. And that is going to be where the divide actually sticks, I think.
Oh, it's going to, well, I put out a video, I can't remember exactly when, but it's called Speak of the Devil. Mm-hmm. And the idea was that they are going to call forth exactly the racist beast that they are claiming dominates the landscape right now, by forcing white people, by backing them into the wall together. You're going to force them to see things in racial terms. And it's not a surprise what's coming. It's perfectly predictable, and it's extremely dangerous.
Yep.
So anyway, good job, Steelmanning. Obviously, the problem with the analysis is that we are forced to the last step. It's not that things are racially well distributed. It's not that they have ever gotten to zero, right? Mm-hmm. We never neutralized the effects of slavery and Jim Crow. And so we don't even know what the experiment would do. I have a pretty good guess, but we don't know what the experiment would do if you ever got everybody to the starting line at the same time. And I think it would be quite equal. But what we are told is that the very fact of disadvantage that shows up in outcomes is evidence of racism, which is a cognitive process occurring inside of the minds of white people. We are also told not only is it there and in need of immediate challenge, but it is incurable. Yeah, okay, those two things don't go together.
Yeah, no, there's a bait and switch constantly, and we can look at this book, this insane white fragility book, and it's harder to pinpoint the claims of activists because they'll always say I didn't mean it then. It was it's not what it seems, but the talking about the population level, the actual systemic truth of systems that have benefited people with white skin, conflating that with individual level racism is something that the movement claims to understand the distinction between, but is very, very happy to do a constant bait and switch between. And of course, this final point that you make, the idea that not only are you born racist, but if you claim you're not, you're proving that you're racist. And if you claim you are, well, then you're obviously racist. It's I think the central rhetorical trap of rhetorical Kafka trap of the entire book and the entire movement, that any defense of yourself is taken as evidence that you are in fact guilty of the thing of which you are accused.
Yeah, there's no escape, and therefore, what is the conclusion of that? The conclusion is you have to do what we say.
Right.
Anybody who understood that you are guilty of racism inherently because of the color of your skin, and who doesn't like that because who likes racism, anybody who agrees with those things, the next question is, okay, well then you're an ally, aren't you? Oh yeah, I guess I'm an ally. Oh, well then if you're an ally, what does that mean? It means you have to do what we say, which means you have to take the risk on our behalf, which means you have to go and punish other people. And so it is a contagious ideology.
Oh, it's effective. What parts of Robin DiAngelo's book do you agree with? There are parts I agree with. How do you hold a dominant culture accountable without slipping into tearing all the white Jesus statues down as a sign of white supremacy? So I did my best to steelman maybe the most egregious point in it by saying, well, if you go back, if you replace the word racist with benefiting from structures that have in the past been racist policies, then yes, people with white skin are in fact still benefiting from those structures today. I maybe will say more about this depending on whether or not I've got a little essay that may come out soon, and if not, I'll share more of this with you guys later.
I would say two things. There are parts of her book that I agree with. The ISBN number, there's a price marker on it. I believe that is the price. I don't believe it's worth it, but I do believe.
But you think they're factually accurate?
Factually,
that's
it costs
by,
that
by
much.
Agree with you mean you think that this is actually a description of reality?
Yeah, to the extent that there is a factual description of the selling price, I agree that it is the selling price. But my point would be, why the hell are we in a situation where we're answering the question, which parts of this incredibly insane book do we believe in? Is that a game now? I mean, which parts of Mein Kampf do we believe in? I mean, no, the book is so bad that searching for the good in it is an insane exercise. Search for a book that is at least somewhat good before you try to find the parts of it.
I'm going to push back on this because many people, you and I are lucky now, not 3 years ago, but that we presumably never have to face one of these things again, one of these trainings, a colleague coming up to you with sad eyes and saying, can you just read the book? Then you'll understand. Just own your white supremacy, right? Like a lot of people are still having to do this. And so being armed with, okay, here's a point that makes sense. And, and now that I've demonstrated my attempt at good faith and understanding what is in this thing, let me explain to you why overall it is divisive, demonic, destabilizing of good political structure and all the rest.
I disagree with this. That book is a Trojan horse. And the idea that we are in some way required to spend our effort finding what might be acceptable in it is preposterous. This is a bad person who's written a dangerous book. And the fact is, there's a limited amount of time in a life. If you're going to dedicate it to books, find one that actually helps you. This one, to read it to find the good in it, you are likely to absorb garbage arguments. So my point would be...
okay, so I'm just like, I just read it, as you know. I had looked at parts of it when it came out, but I actually, because I was asked to write this piece, I actually finally just sat down and read the damn thing, which drove me a bit mad, but I did so over the last couple of days. And I wasn't reading it to find the good, but I was reading it to figure out, what is there, and what are the kernels of truth in this that is being used, brandished as this marker of fealty in this movement, is true that you can point to and say, yes, that thing is true. That is real grievance. That thing is true. But this approach is nasty and reprehensible.
Well, but you also pointed out what I think neither of us knew. There's a piece of tape of Robin DiAngelo speaking at Evergreen that Benjamin Boyce has shown, and I believe Mike Nana in his documentary also shows it.
Yeah, no, actually, just shout out to Benjamin Boyce. So I went to Benjamin when I told him I'd been asked to write this piece and said, I know you've talked about Robin DiAngelo's appearance on campus, on Evergreen campus. Can you point me? And he's done it in a number of places, and he also directed me to the full video. And man, is that woman a piece of work.
Yeah.
So she was there in spring of 2016 while we were actually in Ecuador. It was the same month as the boat accident that I almost died in Galapagos. And we see many of the usual suspects on campus speaking their willfully ridiculous truths.
Yeah.
And we see her actively dividing people, and in her language, some of the stuff that's not even in the book, which wasn't out yet. Like the book came out in 2018, but she was already doing her damage all over the place. We see, I hear in what she says, even some of the turns of phrase that we then saw from our own colleagues just months later that then took an entire college down.
Right. So
she's incredibly powerful.
This is my point.
Yeah.
That was a talk.
Yeah.
Now, had I been at Evergreen when she was there, I would have gone to that talk and I would have asked pointed questions. And I'm, convinced that I understand my own mind well enough that I would not have been persuaded by her nonsense. But it's obviously lethal to people who don't have the proper tools to figure out how to escape the logical traps, right? Yeah. I'm just saying, if you're not expecting these traps, they'll catch you off guard and you'll sign up for things that seem safe and they won't be. So I for the very same reason that I think it is not safe to have her visit your campus and lecture people on the racism that they don't know is in their own minds, it's not safe to assign people the job of figuring out what good exists in her book. It's a garbage book.